shipwreck discovered.
You've dreamt about finding buried treasure since you were a little kid.
How much money are we talking about here?
Tens of millions.
A secret revealed.
We can't go to the police. We can't go to anybody.
Into the blue.
What mark do you plan on making on film in your career? Or do you plan on not making a mark?
I don't know. I don't think that you can really plan something like that. I think it sounds almost self-righteous too, to even think that maybe you would make a mark. I think you just, like anything, like I go into it and I want every experience to be the best it can possibly be. And I do the best work that I can possibly do. And with each and every passing movie that I'm in, I feel like I'm getting better, I'm improving, and I like that about it because I'm super competitive with myself. And you know, I like that there's always room to grow, and I think really all I can hope is that, like, I love nothing more than when people come up to me on the streets and they're like, especially the little kids, and they're like, dude, I love Fast and the Furious, or whatever it is. That feels really good. I mean, it wasn't that long ago where I was a little kid, and I remember going to Star Wars, the very first one, and thinking that was the coolest thing. Like, that was all time. I ran home, I got my lightsaber, and nowadays it's like, I don't know, to even know that there may be one or two people that look at you and the way that I looked at Luke Skywalker, and to think that, man, that guy's really cool, or I'd really like to do what he does. I like that.
Oh, sorry, wrong movie. Hey, it's Scott Hoover with Hollywood.com, and we are here on the deep blue carpet for the premiere of Into the Blue, so let's dive in right now.
Adventure thriller film. It premiered September 30th, 2005. It was on a budget about $50 million, and it brought in about $46 million. It basically barely broke even. It was considered a flop at the time, and it still is, technically. The movie was directed by John Stockwell, which, surprisingly, you might know as Cougar from Top Gun.
Cougar. Thanks, Maverick.
Or Dennis from Christine.
Of course, the car came back 3 weeks later.
What do you mean, came back?
Paul Walker plays Jared, who is a relaxed but confident 29-year-old accomplished freediver. Obviously, he's known for Brian O'Connor in Fast and Furious, Too Fast and Furious at this time. He was Lance Harbor in Varsity Blues, and then Caleb Mandrake in The Skulls, along with Lewis in Joyride. Scott Conn plays Bryce, who is a witty and bold New York-based lawyer. He's known for Tweeter in Varsity Blues, Tumblr in Gone 60 Seconds, and Turk in the Ocean's films. And actually, for a long time, I had no clue that his dad is actually James Conn. I didn't know that for a long time, but yeah.
All right, let's get it over with.
Jessica Alba plays Sam, who is the resourceful and capable girlfriend of Jared. She works with sharks at an exhibit. She's obviously known for playing Sue Storm in Fantastic Four this same year that this movie came out. And she was also Nancy in Sin City. And we have Ashley Scott. She plays Amanda. She's a daring and often misguided girl Bryce meets shortly before their introduction to the film. She also voiced Maria in both of the Last of Us video games.
This is Maria. Be nice to her. She sort of runs things around here.
Ma'am, thanks for not blowing my head off.
Would have been embarrassing, considering you're my brother-in-law.
Josh Brolin plays Bates. He's a former friend / boss of Jared and Sam. He is largely an antagonist to our protagonist, largely known for playing the Mad Titan Thanos in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. He also started Men in Black 3 as a pitch-perfect young Tommy Lee Jones. I mean, the guy was incredible doing that.
Where's my daddy?
He went to go do something very special. And he wanted me to stay here and take care of his best pal.
And of course, he had a role in the Goonies. So the basic storyline of Into the Blue is that we follow Jared and Sam, Paul Walker and Jessica Alba's characters. They're out living in the Bahamas. They're just normal people. They're kind of down on their luck, but they kind of aspire to be more and to find treasures that they often read about. They are just very adventurous people. Jared and Sam's friend Bryce actually visits the island along with his new girlfriend Amanda, and they start hanging out and having fun together when they discover a plane wreck.
Find something? Yeah, a plane. Like an airplane? Yeah, like an airplane. Well, that's odd.
This plane wreck actually contains a lot of contents, especially drug contents. They struggle to find what to do about this while they're also getting traces of a sunken ship somewhere close by too. In order to salvage the sunken ship, Jared needs about 30 grand. And they keep fighting back and forth about, well, we should go get these drugs off this plane, get the money, and get our treasures. And Jared and Sam are just a little more noble and want to go towards the shipwreck first and then report the plane. There's tensions all throughout the movie like that, but that's basically the basic storyline without giving too much away. And I kind of want to keep it brief. So if I had to generalize what I think about Into the Blue and this movie as a whole, is that it's one of the great early 2000s movies that's kind of adventurous. It's got a lot of fun, kinetic energy, good music, a lot of good visuals. It's just one of those movies that just kind of sunk with time. It's not talked about. It's definitely not a popular movie by any means. It's always been a guilty pleasure of mine. I've always really enjoyed it. Obviously, I've liked a lot of Paul Walker's work along with Scott Conn and Jessica Alba. But the pairing of this movie, especially with Paul Walker and Scott Conn being friends in real life and on screen, really lends well to a believable chemistry. They're funny together. I mean, they kind of sell the movie together. But there actually is like an overall theme of this movie. It's kind of repeated here and there, but it's would you give up treasure for love? Now, they have a couple instances throughout the movie that kind of reiterate this, but it's not like a huge focus.
Would you give up treasure for love? Would you give up treasure for love?
But I think one of the biggest selling points of this movie, and it was to the actors too, was that the fact that they're filming in the Bahamas. This bright blue, clear water with all this nice marine life, sunny. I mean, it's a breathtaking place to look at. And, you know, I mean, it lends well for a film. Like, it's just an incredible place to want to film. I mean, it translates really well to the screen. And in this movie, there's also a mention of P. Diddy juice.
Amanda, come here. Look at the P. Diddy juice.
1853, good year.
Keep it crispy, pop the top.
Yeah, that didn't age too well, did it? So I guess the transition, I want to talk about some positives I have with the movie, and then I'm going to talk about some negatives. And then also I'm going to talk about some deleted scenes and other facts and stuff you may not have known. I actually listened to the director's commentary on this movie for the first time, which, ironic as it sounds, as many movies as I have that have director's commentary or actors in them, I've never probably listened to one of them. I think I've listened to bits and pieces, but I've never sat through one start to finish. And I'm kind of glad I did this time. I learned a lot about the movie and its production and other things that you otherwise couldn't read about or find. So yeah, let's get started. To start with my positives, I just want to talk about Paul Walker. He's going to be where I start. He's the easiest thing that comes into mind. Paul Walker is just always likable, and he brings like an everyman quality to a lot of the characters he plays. You kind of buy into him just being a normal dude with a pretty straight moral compass. He sells that really well. He always has done that. You believe he's capable, and you believe he's as smart as he is and resourceful. And I think a lot of that is due to Paul being a diver and being experienced in the water prior to this movie. Paul liked marine biology. I mean, that was just kind of his bread and butter. So I think it translated really well to his character in this movie. He can nail the fun charm, but he can also nail some of the more serious moments that are required throughout different parts of the movie. But in this movie in particular, I do really like those shades of greed that we actually get from him, which is not something we normally get in other movies, but he's got some shades of greed that actually shine, and he actually has to deal with the repercussions of that greed and what that means to him and everyone else around him. I kind of think that's kind of interesting. Another positive, Scott Conn is obviously the standout the entire film. The dude is just so charismatic. He's funny. I mean, the guy's just witty. Like, he was so funny as Tweeter in Varsity Blues and other things I've seen him in, but here he's just as funny. Scott was able to improv just as much as the other actors. That was kind of something that was done in the movie, and I think it definitely benefits from it.
Can't keep this though, right? Yep. Huh?
Jackass.
Okay, good.
I think Jessica Alba is very likable. She's lovable. You definitely believe that she is a nice partner to Jared and she's capable to do what he's doing. Jessica's awesome in this movie, and she also gets a really good fight scene towards the third act, which I think is really cool. It's one of my favorite. It's got some really cool bits in it, but it's like one of my favorite bits in the movie. And to speak on that, Jared and Sam's chemistry, Paul Walker and Jessica Alba, I think is really fluid. I mean, it's really, you kind of, again, like I said before, you believe that both of them are kind of smart in their field of what they're talking about, and they're both divers. You believe it, and I like that, and they got some nice chemistry. And yeah, I think it works well for that too. It really helps sell the relationship part of this. This one has always teetered on negative and positive for me. But on the positive side, I think Ashley Scott does a great job playing someone that I don't think we're supposed to like. I have definitely never liked her, but let's just stay positive. But yeah, she does a great job playing someone that we're not really supposed to fall in love with like we are with the other three of them. She's definitely not lovable. She's morally gray. She's often a foil to our protagonist, but I think she does a great job of playing. She strikes that weird balance of not being likable, but also kind of, she's more or less not likable, but she as an actress, I think, isn't like that, but she does a good job playing someone who is morally gray like Amanda is. And then lastly, I think Josh Brolin is really good for what little screen time he has. Now, you know, nowadays we think of Josh Brolin, it's like, oh my God, you know, like he's Thanos, you know, he was Agent K in Men in Black, like I had mentioned. I mean, the guy's a big name. He's really not in this movie a whole lot, and there's some of his scenes on the cutting room floor, deleted scenes that I'll get to later. He's charming even in moments where he's a little more antagonistic to our protagonist. Josh Brolin has that charm just like he did with Thanos. And it definitely is a cool twist to learn that he is the main villain of the story by the time the movie wraps up. But yeah, I don't think he quite got enough, and there are deleted scenes that kind of fill in those gaps. But for what little he is in here for this, I think Josh Brolin is great. But another huge praise that I feel like really sticks out with me throughout the whole movie is just the natural wittiness and the comedy. Now, I think a lot of it feels natural because the director, John Stockwell, actually said a lot of it was improvised, like I'd mentioned before. It just comes off really fluid, and Paul and Scott have some really good chemistry, and so do Scott and Jessica, and back and forth. Like, Scott is definitely like the person that everyone orbits around. Like, Scott is just so funny. And, but yeah, I mean, the comedy and just the natural feeling of you definitely buy that Paul and all of them are friends. Like, they do a great job selling that. That's one thing. I always get a chuckle every time I see some of these jokes.
Hey, so you must be Lisa?
Who's Lisa?
Yeah, who the hell is Lisa? Amanda.
Hi.
You're such an idiot. He's insane. You did good.
But to kind of piggyback off of that, like I mentioned before, I think one of the biggest positives, if not the biggest positive for me in this movie, is the fact that Paul and Scott are so believable as friends. And I definitely think that boils down to Scott and Paul being really good friends before this movie off screen and in the movie on screen. They really sell that friendship because they actually had it in real life.
I mean, ask anybody who really knew him. He was a real one, man. And it's funny because he was so good looking, and you wouldn't expect it, but he was a tough dude, man. And he was a good dude. And, it's a bummer. It was that was a shock. That one stuck me because he had a lot more to do, and
So Jared and Bryce, or Paul and Scott, they share several scenes throughout the movie, but one of my favorites that really sticks out to me is the shot where Jared and Bryce are standing at a sunset, and Bryce is kind of trying to convince Jared to go get the shipwreck by getting the drug money, and doing it that way, and kind of going the morally gray route that Jared's probably not liking too much. But he makes a really good analogy. He makes a really good case to state. He says, yeah, you're young now, it won't be like that forever. One day you're going to be the old man at the end of the bar with nothing but sand in your pocket, and you're going to be delirious and say that you were the one that found the Zephyr, that you were the one who should have got the fame instead of someone else. And I love how the score is layered into this along with the cinematography. I mean, in the sunset, I mean, it just looks so cool. It's a really cool shot, and I like the dialogue I mean, I think Scott really actually gets to flex a little bit of those acting muscles in that moment by giving the dialogue. I think that's really cool, which actually, that scene was actually used for auditions, especially for Scott, which I will play right here.
I mean, the whole board short and flip-flop thing is so cute. I mean, it's really cute. Now, what about when you're the old fart? The old fat man sitting at the end of the bar with your beer belly and your cracked feet, still living in the same hole, okay? With nothing but sand in your pockets. Dude, do you want to wake up at 50 years old? Wake up, sitting on the end of a bar, droning on and on about how you're the one who found the Viceroy? Huh? But Mel Fisher came up and snatched that from under you? F that, bro. Come on. Dude, winners make the rules. Losers live by them. Think about those pirates. What about those pirates back in the day? Did they give a shit about things like right and wrong? Hell no, dude. They saw what they wanted. They took that.
And they
shit.
all ended up at the bottom of the ocean.
We're all gonna end up at the bottom of the ocean. We're all gonna end up at the bottom of the ocean. You're the one who said it. This shit's not about drugs. It's not about drugs. It's about treasure.
The cinematography by Shane Hurlbut is overlooked, but is really nice. I think it's a lot of his work and the way that they frame certain things, especially the landscapes and certain shots. I think it looks really good, and I kind of think it goes unnoticed. I noticed that the last time I've watched it. I mean, I was like, man, that's a really good shot. And then also, the underwater cinematography is incredible, and that's all thanks to Pete Zuccarini, and which also rolls into probably my biggest positive besides Scott and Paul, is that the underwater photography and cinematography is just top tier. Like, I love the way that the movie looks with these really bright colors and the natural light that comes from the Bahamas with the sun going through the water and going off of the soft sand, and the way that people look underwater and the marine life. Like, they done an incredible job with the underwater segments of this movie, and they spend a decent little bit of time in the water. And I love that they actually went out and done it out in the real waters with real marine life, real sharks, real fish, and the real dangers there. Like, I love that. The fact that there was practicality making this movie. I really respect that, and I think it really translates well when you see it on screen. But I also do want to mention the score. The score by Paul Haslinger is easily forgotten in retrospective, but I think is great and offers that extra layer of immersion, especially in times where you're not even really thinking about it, or just times that it's just a nice layer to the scene or whatever's going on. And also with that, I really like just the soundtrack, just the music that's used throughout the movie in general. I think they've got some really kind of cool music choices that are very kinetic and provide a lot of like energy and just provide a lot of liveliness to the movie and the vibes that are going on. I think it definitely fits 2005 and what they're doing. It just, I get a kick out of it. I like it. But another praise I can give is towards director John Stockwell. And one of his main goals was to capture the vastness of the Bahamas and the landscape. And I definitely think he did that. There's some really great shots in here over the water and under the water. I think he does a good job with that. But with the underwater sequences and over water, I think there's some really nice tension and suspenseful moments with some good action over the water and under the water. I think there's some really great segments. I think they're done very well, and I like that there's added elements of like, okay, how would these people really deal with this? And that's questions that they pondered on the production too. Like, okay, on emergency situations, how would they deal with not having air? How would they deal with this and this underwater? I mean, it's really cool, and I think there's some really cool scenes that kind of portray that, and I think they were done really well. But to speak on that, I also love that dark twist of horror that really comes out of nowhere sometime towards the halfway or through three-quarter mark of the movie, where Amanda, Bryce, and Jared, they're diving down to get the drug dealer's drugs out of the plane, and it's at nighttime. Now, Sam didn't want any part of this. She ends up leaving Jared and the rest of them, so it's just three of them. But they go down in the middle of the night to salvage the plane and get some stuff out of it. And constantly throughout this segment, you get the feeling that something's lurking in the shadows and watching Amanda and Bryce and Jared. And eventually we actually see that Amanda is attacked by a shark. And it's the way that they portray it with less is more, which is what I like. It's a less is more type of thing because you barely get to see when she notices a shark coming towards her. And then you hear over Jared's radio the struggle that's going on. You don't see any of the attack hardly. And then after it's done, you know, they pick her up and get her on the boat, and she's missing a huge part of her leg. And then she actually surprisingly dies from that injury. It's kind of a really dark twist that's got a little bit of a horror element to it. And I've always liked it. That was really unexpected the first time I watched this, I don't know how many years ago. I mean, this movie's got just all these different little flavors in it. And I definitely like that twist of horror that they kind of threw into this. And that ain't the last time either. Because after Amanda's death, make a long story short, Jared comes up empty-handed and tells the drug dealers, hey, we had complications. We had someone die. I don't have what you need. And then they end up catching back up to Jared. He gives himself up. And instead of the drug stuff, Jared has some other treasure and stuff he found from Trace at the Zephyr. He had a sword and some other little things. And he was like, yep, this is worth way more than the drugs that your boss wants. Let's go see him. So they go back to the yacht that they were at earlier. And they find everybody's dead. They walk into like a massacre after it's already happened. And Jared has to get down on the ground while everybody scopes it out. And you see people getting picked off. And he gets curious. He goes downstairs and finds all these dead bodies, including that other guy he's speaking to earlier who was like the drug boss or whatever.
You found my plane, didn't you? Take some balls stealing my cocaine and trying to sell it back to me.
Your cocaine. Okay, now that's something we didn't know.
No, listen,
I swear
listen, there's 800 kilos in that plane, and I want every brick of it in 12 hours' time.
And then out of the closet, here comes Bates just stepping out, wiping blood off of him. And just Josh Brolin's very calm and just demeanor, his calm demeanor and his line delivery just sends shivers down your spine.
You have something that belongs to me, Jared?
And I like that. It's a less is more type of thing. You don't get to see him do all that with his other guys. But I like that they just walk into it after it's already done. And it gives just a little twist of horror whenever Jared figures out what's going on and his facial expressions as he tries to run and flee from them. I like that. Those two moments of like horror type twist or suspense, I really like that. Shark attack and then this massacre on the yacht and some other things we see in the movie with some of the action. It's surprisingly kind of gruesome and it hurts. Like, every time I watch them, I'm like, dang, man, it really hurts. Or like, I don't want to know what that feels like. Like they did a really good job doing that. I really like that. It kind of pushes that boundary of PG-13, which is something I'll mention later with they were kind of struggling to maintain a PG-13 rating with all the stuff they had in the film. They kept having to tweak it because it was kind of getting a little violent and a little gruesome. But I think lastly, another praise I can give it is just the nature and just the vibe of the entire movie itself. The location of the Bahamas offers its magnificent colors. I mean, this movie bleeds with nothing but just pure entertainment that's not too serious nor silly. It's that feeling that movies now just simply lack, besides the few exceptions. This movie is simply just fun. It's super enjoyable to digest with its surprisingly good action. It's got some sharp comedy, incredible visuals, some pretty solid acting, and just a little pinch of that horror that's also sprinkled into it that I just really like. This movie's just got a couple little different flavors. Obviously, the cast is super likable. They've got good chemistry. The location is really good to look at. Like, to visually look at, this movie is just entertaining just to watch. I mean, it looks great. It's just a fun movie. Into the Blue isn't mentioned hardly at all. But I think, again, like I said earlier, I think it's one of the great 2000s like popcorn adventure movies with a bright and kinetic cast / location to breathe life into its overall orbit. Is this an Oscar winner or even a great film? No. But it's a good movie and it entertained me. And that's really all it's about to me. Sometimes I'm not really in the mood for that prestigious film, you know, that has something to say or it requires a lot of thinking. Sometimes I'd rather just have some fun and not think about too hard about what I'm watching. And this movie definitely fits in that category, and it's entertaining. That's that's all I can really say about it. So to transition into the negatives side of this, I really only have a few, but let's go over them. I'll be honest, I mean, like I mentioned before, Amanda and Ashley Scott is a positive. Ashley Scott is a positive to this movie, but Amanda as a character, I think, is a negative for me. She always really just often annoyed me. And like I said, she was often a foil to our protagonist. She made things harder on them. She was just so morally out of whack compared to the three of our protagonists. Like, even Bryce at one point, he says, yeah, whenever we find this treasure, you know, we're going to cut her out. And Jared's like, dude, if you cut her out, she's definitely going to tell. And Bryce's like, look, man, we're family, Sam's family, but she's not family. I've only known this girl for like a couple of days.
You cut her out? Yeah. Guaranteed she's telling everyone. She's gonna talk? No, she talks. Dude, we'll have her in the Special Olympics next year, okay? She's not gonna talk.
It just ain't working. Like, even they know that, like, she just ain't it. She belong, like, there's a couple moments in this movie, especially one in the club where, like, yeah, she belongs to the streets, dude. Like, she belongs to the streets. You know what I'm talking about.
Hey, my man. Girls with me.
Just talking to the lady, my boy.
Yeah, I'm just telling you she's with me.
Baby's cool.
What's cool?
It's free now, you know, just join someone.
What's up, we're good, bro. We're good.
But another negative I have is just the lack of character development from Bates. Now, I did mention this in the positives, you know, or general notes, you know, just general things about the movie, but Bates, or Josh Brolin's character, I think is just underdeveloped, and he's not in here a whole lot. And I guess what it really boiled down to is he didn't have enough screen time to build up to be our villain. Now, there was implied history that tied him with our protagonist, but it wasn't explored in the theatrical cut. But like I mentioned before, this actually existed in the form of deleted scenes. His lack of scenes created a better twist that he's the villain, but the lack of exposure also leaves him feeling underdeveloped when it's all said and done at the end of the day. But yeah, that deleted scene that I mentioned, I will get to whenever we start doing the facts and then deleted scenes. Another negative I have is just kind of a similar thing, like similar to Bates, Roy, Sam, and Jared's like officer friend and his family, along with the side character Danny. They're not really developed as much. Like, they're there a couple times throughout the movie, but we don't really get much about them. And again, this is all on the cutting room floor deleted scenes, which I'll get to later. But my last little negative, which is kind of more or less nitpicks, which every film has them. It just depends on how noticeable they are. But I'm going to talk about just my little negatives, things is just kind of maybe some mistakes that you might notice on a third rewatch, or if you've seen it multiple times, you may pick it up. But on a first or second watch, I don't really think you're going to notice, or you may never notice these things. But I'll give you some examples of what I'm talking about. Some small things, like just like one shot will have characters with masks on, and then the next they might be gone and just magically reappear. And, you know, that's an obvious example. The rest are very small errors that go right over your head because they aren't really the subject of the scene or segment. Such as Amanda getting caught in cargo netting when she was in the plane early in the movie. You can actually spot another diver behind her trying to get out of the shot, which is just kind of funny. It's something I've never noticed, but now it's just glaringly obvious just after reading some stuff, and just, yeah, it's there. And there's a couple extra little small things, but that's really all, honestly, that's really all my negatives. They're very far and few. I think just the negative in general is just a lack of character development, which also kind of ties into less time with the people we are supposed to care about and see in the movie. We just don't really get enough of that. But yeah, that's really my only negative. The continuity and little movie mistakes are just kind of nitpicks. But yeah, I figured I'd just mention that. So to transition a little bit, we're going to talk about some facts about the movie that I learned while watching the movie with the director's commentary and just other things I've read. And we're also going to talk about some mistakes also, things that the director pointed out and stuff that I noticed too. But yeah, let's just kind of start. It's never really clearly stated, but the movie is shot and takes place in Nassau, Bahamas. Director actually stated that a week or so before shooting, Paul actually had issues clearing his ears after being in water. He actually had an operation done to clear his ears right before filming. However, it was reportedly painful for him to free dive and be in the water even after the operation was done. So he said it was kind of a painful shoot for, I don't know if it was the entire shoot or if it was just a portion of it, but it's kind of interesting thing. Jared and Sam's dog Boone is actually Paul's real life dog. Apparently during the shoot, it jumped in the water around real sharks that rushed to approach the dog. And the production team had to fend off the sharks from Boone. And then they said the dog even disappeared sometimes.
Do you have any dogs?
Yeah, I have one dog. His name is Boone. He's a Chesapeake Bay Retriever. He looks like you know what a Labrador is?
Yes.
Have you ever seen a chocolate Labrador? He looks like a chocolate Labrador, right? He has the same body lines and the same color, but he has like a woolly coat. He's got curly hair. Jessica Alba apparently had a past with water and diving similar to Paul, and it said it made it very natural for her to shoot the movie. And then, like I mentioned before, obviously Paul and Scott are great friends, obviously working together in Varsity Blues, but we're also roommates.
What was it like working with Paul Walker? Do you remember it? Did you work with him?
Yeah, man, that was my man. I met Paul at a reading. We did Varsity Blues, and I did a reading with him and the whole cast. And it was the first time I met him. We did a reading at the Red Lion Hotel in Austin, and they said, "Hey, there's only one car per 2 cast members." And I knew that he surfed and I surfed. I'm like, "Hey, you want to share a car?" He's like, "Yeah, let's share a car." That day we were doing like donuts in the car. By the end of that day, we got an apartment together, and by the end of the shoot, we were best friends, training jiu-jitsu together.
Wow.
Going like that was like the first actor friend of mine, like that we were tight. We did that other movie together, Into the Blue, and he was always I feel like we had a lot in common, man. He was a down-to-earth dude, and well, not to say that I'm a down-to-earth dude, but I mean, we just liked a lot of the same stuff. And he was a no bullshit, non-Hollywood type of dude.
Director said Scott would love to leave the page and improvise a lot of his lines and a lot of the things that they did. The owner of the nice house near the beginning is given a cameo later in the film, right here. The first playful scene under the water with the music going was mostly pre-production footage and / test footage that just happened to look really good, and they actually wanted to use it for the finished film. There were actually crew members dressed in thick suits with chainmail suits and sticks to surround and protect cast and other members from sharks and marine life if they needed assistance. Scott was actually really terrified of sharks, and that played into his character Bryce really well because Bryce was scared of sharks. So everything you see on film is pretty realistic. They were talking about how fish bits were thrown near shooting area to try to keep sharks and other things attracted to have marine life stay in the shot. But they had a close call one time where they threw a fish bit close to Paul, and then they swarmed around him. Even Paul Walker was talking about how during filming that Jessica Alba threw his mask real close to his face and splashed the water.
And Jessica's character is supposed to throw me my mask and my fins. And she threw me my first fin. It was good. I caught it. It stayed out of the water. She throws me the second fin, and I caught it.
That one likes my fin a lot. Here we go.
The mask she threw, and I went to grab it real quick. It hit the water. I didn't catch it. I pulled my hand back real quick. We never saw that mask again. And it was right in front of me.
You see that one just caressing my foot? I was just hanging out.
That was pretty intense.
Similar to every other production, the director explained how keeping consistent lighting and weather continuity shot to shot was a challenge, especially in that area of the shoot where the weather and other things would change rapidly, and the sun and the clouds, just normal stuff that productions run into. Scott actually came up with the diving with mop on the day for fun. And a shark, yes, really did come up and take it within minutes, and his reactions are real. None of this was really scripted out beforehand, and it happened kind of on the fly when they were there on the day on camera, underwater. Certain sharks actually kept coming around, and they were recognized while shooting, and they actually gave them names and monikers based on their behavior. The director actually said that they had 3 DC-3 aircrafts in the movie. The first one underwater is labeled as the Underwater DC-3, and it was placed about 45 foot down in the real waters of the Bahamas to sit on an artificial reef. The director actually explained that they wanted to build an artificial reef to lay the plane under, because they didn't want to damage an actual real reef out in the Bahamas. There actually was a stunt and diving double for Paul named Alex. And even the director said he had a hard time telling apart which was Paul and which was Alex just because they looked similar. One of the other 3 DC-3 aircrafts that I mentioned, they said the second one was constructed in a water tank for filming the interior of the aircraft. Director said that all the tank shots are void of real marine life. He said he wanted to CG or use real fish in tank, but it was very costly and opted not to. So all the shots where they're in the interior of the plane are all within like a big swimming pool, basically. That's why you never see any fish or nothing swimming around. It's always in a controlled environment in a big swimming pool. It's funny, they actually said there was a lot of work just in trying to get the bricks of cocaine right in the interior of the plane. They wanted them to float kind of naturally and to be kind of neutral, not have too much negative or positive buoyancy. They said that was kind of a struggle at first, which I thought was funny. Director John Stockwell actually stated during trying to direct underwater sequences was challenging, which I'm sure it would be. He actually went down underwater to try and use hand signals to direct, but he said he mostly had a monitor rigged on a boat to watch while having an underwater microphone to communicate with the actors and the crew. Also, the water was often so cold to shoot due to the time of year the production took place, which actually started in January. The water was said to be about 70 degrees, which may sound warm, but they said they would have been cold within like half an hour. They'd have to give them breaks because they would literally be really cold. They couldn't stand it. Actually, some of the treasure on screen is actually real finds from the divers in the Cayman Islands, and they were actually lended for the film, which I thought was cool. The director actually pointed out that rubber ice cubes were actually used in the pool sequence. You can actually see Amanda drinking in a little glass, but the director actually explained having to add those actual real sound effects of ice chattering in a glass cup in post-production. It sounds kind of silly, but, you know, they need to keep consistency for the shots where the ice doesn't melt too fast, or you know, they need to make it look the same shot to shot. You know, it's just a silly thing that is common in movie making. It's just something that you don't think about that is done a lot, just like with other things that we kind of don't even notice. It's the magic of movie making, I'll put it that way. During the scene with Jared speaking to the guy about diving equipment, the director actually stated that there was a karaoke event happening in the background that was cut and reworked. And that kind of explains the girls dancing to a black screen with some kind of weird green outline, which is kind of easily missed, but obviously makes no sense. And the director says how it just bugged him. But once you notice it's there, you'll always notice it, but I've never noticed that until this last watch through. And actually in the same scene, Paul's radio mic is actually visible right at the collar of his t-shirt. The director said he noticed this, but he liked this take of Paul so much that he just kind of lived with it and went on and left it in the final cut. They actually strategically had the actors wearing the same swimming gear and suits, so it would allow some flexibility. That way they could use their underwater shots kind of wherever they wanted in the movie. More or less, they had more flexibility of putting this sequence in this segment and kind of retooling these underwater sequences throughout different parts of the movie if they had to. And also another thing, they spent weeks trying to get the mast discovery scene. The one where they actually discover the mast of the Zephyr. They're going to bring it up to the surface. Amanda's up on the boat and the actual Bahamas, the cops are up there. That whole sequence where Bryce is trapped with his arm, they said it was a nightmare to shoot. It took several weeks to do. They said it was just a huge issue with the mast itself being fiberglass, and then the inflating bags to bring it to the surface. They wanted it to not float up too fast, but not too slow. They said it was hard to shoot. In the same scene, Jessica's silver hooded suit was actually attracted to sharks, and the crew didn't know this. This is kind of unknown. But there is a shot of, I think it's either the double or Jessica actually pushing a shark away, trying to approach her. And I think that's real. On the patrol boat, there was actually real officers alongside the casted actor Roy, you know, who's friends with Jared and Sam. But the rest of them, I think, are actually real Bohemian police. At the club segment next, the scene with Paul and his buddy Danny warning about the guys on his trail and asking about his ventures was actually shot at a restaurant. This wasn't even part of the club sequence. It was actually a separate scene later in the movie. And the only thing that really gives this away is if you look at Paul's shirt, or Jared's shirt closely, his collared shirt doesn't match with what he's wearing at the club. But with really nice, really smart sound editing and just general editing tricks in general, you don't even notice it. It's really easy to miss, and they do a good job, retooling that and hiding it within this segment that it doesn't even belong in. But it's kind of funny, at that same segment, the club segment, Bryce starts getting into a fight with Primo, that other guy. And the actual extras were caught off guard, and they weren't sure if the scripted fight with Bryce was real or fake. So it kind of made it better. The director said they went wild. Some of them, they just treat it like it was a real fight in a club, and it obviously made their behavior a little more natural and looked really good on camera. The crane scene at the sunset was one of the last things they said they shot. However, this scene was used as the audition scene, like I mentioned earlier, and they said that Paul was he was actually the first actor cast in the entire film. Bryce and Amanda actually go and get some drugs out of the plane, and they actually meet back up with some of the guys they met at the club. And then right outside, when Bryce is waiting for her in the car, and he's kind of hyping himself up and looking in the mirror, the director said this was literally nearly 10 minutes of Scott just improvising, and they said the crew were just dying laughing, cracking up. I mean, he's just improvising and just having a lot of fun. They said they really enjoyed that.
It's all good. What's up, bro? You want the 1, 2, 3? 1, 2, 3.
The remains of the Zephyr were a real constructed ship that was put in the open water for filming, which I thought was really cool. But during the shark stalking scene at night, they actually had a real camera guy hanging onto the tail of a shark with a camera. So whenever you see the camera kind of more or less swimming like a shark, it's because there actually literally is a dude hanging on a shark getting the shots. And the director said they would actually cut right before you'd see the camera guy's hands on the shark. But Amanda's shark attack and this wound, they actually said the entire attack and the wound was actually a lot more graphic in the actual conception, the initial production. But they said they had to tweak it to obtain the PG-13 rating because they said it was kind of too gruesome. So I thought that was kind of interesting too. But later, when Jared T-bones that small car in his pickup, the woman driving who blows up on them is actually a production member.
You okay?
But the Land Rover, who's actually chasing Jared and them, and his stunt driver, when Jared backed out and got away, the Land Rover pulls out and hits a wall, which wasn't even supposed to happen. This was actually a legit mistake, but it looked good for the film, and it also explained how Jared and everybody had a few seconds after they got away from him to swap and then catch back up to Jared. But no surprise, Paul was actually a fairly skilled road driver and boat operator, which is displayed on film too. Like they said, he done really well on the road, and he did really well in the water, especially driving and being on a boat. What's really funny is the director said that Paul and Scott would just often grab Paul's boat or whatever boat and just disappear on the water for like 10, 20, 30 minutes at a time. You know, they were really bros, just hanging out and just having a lot of fun out in the Bahamas for the few months that they were there. But apparently, whenever Sam is captured on the boat with Bates, and we were full swing of Bates being the villain, and Jared's like, we found the Zephyr, and Bates doesn't believe me. He said, yeah, fairy tale. Yeah, I don't believe that. And apparently, Josh Brolin, he actually came up with the line about the Tooth Fairy and Santa Claus, and he came up with all that.
Found the Zephyr. Maybe we'll meet up in Never Never Land, because I heard the Tooth Fairy was going to be there. And Santa Claus is coming, you know, with my coat.
Which is just really funny. I mean, it's just one of those scenes that just kind of always cracks me up. It's just kind of goofy, but it's just the way he sells it. I always find it hilarious. But in the same sequence, right after this, you know, Sam needs to pull Roy's body so she can start looking for a way to get out. And what's funny is the actor was just really too heavy for Jessica to pull. So they placed a little cart under his body. And the director said how goofy it looked. He said, I swear you can even see the cart whenever she's pulling him. But that's something kind of little too, like a little mistake / thing that you could pick out. But I thought that was kind of funny too. Sam severing Roy's hand was actually originally more graphic too. But they obviously toned this down along with the entire sequence of Bates shooting him up close. There was supposedly a little more blood and, you know, just general things like that. They just kind of toned it down and cut it back for the final cut of the movie. But after Bates is killed, Sam dives in the water for Jared, which we actually see this in the movie. But there actually was a version where she found him in the water and they actually share a kiss, which was cut. However, there is a photo or somewhere from the production floating around that actually has this scene in it. But yeah, it's just something funny, and I kind of see why they cut it. It's just kind of unnecessary. Ironically, it was Scott who came up with the diving off the boat after the gold idea. That was all his idea, which, just like some earlier stuff in the movie, I think, you know, he lends a lot of good comedy, and of course, Bryce would dive after it. That's just kind of in character for him.
What the hell?
What's he doing?
What a jag off.
Hey! I got the cheese!
What?
I have the dough! What? I have gold!
You found the gold?
The dough, baby!
What do you mean you found the gold?
God's no letting go!
Wow!
Yeah!
And then obviously the credit sequence later, it was a montage of all that underwater footage they had of the production and test and just other little things that they had. And the director said, yeah, he said, we wanted to include some shots, like, you know, certain shots that just didn't really have a place in the film, so this is a good place to put them. He said a lot of them look really nice, and that's where they ended up. And then finally, I want to talk about some deleted scenes. Some things that were cut from the final film, some things that kind of filled in some gaps that I had mentioned earlier with critiques I had. Just some kind of interesting things. Some of them I understand why they're cut, but then some of them I'm like, yeah, maybe they could have been retooled, but given the context of some of the scenes, even the director stated, yeah, it would have been really tough to cut these things down without making them incoherent and not make any sense. But let's talk about a couple of them right here. The movie was actually supposed to open with the now deleted scene of Jared saving a young kid from drowning. This would have took place around the time where we get introduced to Jared and he's diving with other people. But when he gets up on the boat, he notices that some woman's talking about her son being missing. And he dives back in and gets him. And that actually is supposed to lead right into his boss being a jerk to him and him pushing him off the water. Now, obviously, they retooled this, the part with him and his boss interact into the final cut, but what you're missing is him going back in there to save the kid. The director said we felt like maybe we didn't need to see him as like a big hero. We just kind of needed to cut that because I think it's already kind of implied or understood that he's a decent guy. So, I mean, I kind of get why they cut that. There's actually another scene where they were inside the house, the one that Bryce bartered whenever he was a lawyer that they went to and got the jet skis and the boats. There was actually a scene where they were inside the house, and it provided a little more explanation of Bryce and his acquisition of the place. But it was ultimately cut to include a briefer scene of the exterior. That's the one we got in the final film. It covers the same information that we get inside the house, and it's a little more brief. However, the director also stated, he said, we got this really nice place. It's kind of a shame we didn't get to see any of the inside of it. To kind of coincide with that, it further had our characters have a mishap with their boat, the one they get when they get the house. And when they had this mishap, they actually get baits to bring them back to shore. Here, we could actually further establish Jared's history with baits, and there's actually a photograph where you actually see Jared with Bates and the rest of the guys in their crew. And this kind of gives more spotlight on Bates and his kind of undeniable charm with like Amanda that was kind of earlier hinted with Sam a little bit. Like, the dude's just a charmer. He really is, even though he's kind of got some sinister vibes to him that we haven't picked up on yet. But ironically, this is the only scene that Amanda and Bates' characters share with each other. I thought that was kind of interesting. You go through that the whole movie with these two characters and they don't ever share a scene in the theatrical cut. But in this cut, they actually do, this deleted scene, they actually do share a scene together. But another scene actually focused on Jared and Sam's connection to the community and kind of further developed their friendship with Roy and Danny and their family that's kind of mentioned elsewhere in the movie with Roy's kids and his wife. We get a whole sequence where they're just eating, and it's nice. You know, we kind of understand a little more about their relationship. I kind of understand why it's not needed, because we kind of get enough explanation throughout the movie and some other lines of dialogue that kind of give us the same conclusion. There actually is one scene that I think is really interesting, because the more I thought about it, the more it confused me about why it was happening and its place on the rest of the film. But the scene I'm talking about is Bryce. And I don't know exactly when this could have took place, but I'm kind of guessing that after Bryce ditches Sam, he actually goes to the airport, and that's where this scene takes place. So the scene is Bryce actually holding Amanda's passport, and he's kind of looking, and he actually decides to throw it away, waiting in line to basically fly out of there. I kind of almost wish there was a different version of this that still retained his look and regret and mourning for someone he had watched just die. With this scene in here, I guess it implies that maybe he decided not to fly away, which also kind of, if this scene was in here, that would make that line a little later make more sense, wherever Bryce, like, he's talking to Jared, he said, Bates doesn't know I'm still here, right?
Bates know I'm still here?
Y'all have really never interacted or met. Like, how would he know whether you're here in general?
Huh. Not a lot to see out there, is there? You got a new spot? Are you keeping to yourself? Keeping it from me?
You know, he wouldn't know, so maybe the airport scene, if they cut, would have kind of made that make a little more sense. Like, it was implied that he had left, but he really didn't. But either way, I thought that was cool that it was in here. We see Scott kind of give a little more acting, especially on the dramatic side, and kind of pondering over what just happened. Which I think in the movie, they kind of skim over it just a little too fast with Amanda's death and how Bryce feels about it. And he even defends his case. He said, I've known this girl for, 4 or 5 days, and
Amanda's dead, and you're still thinking about treasure.
I've known her for 5 days.
He said, I don't feel much for her, which is, it seems kind of, harsh, but at the same time, I mean, it's just the nature of what happened, and Bryce, I don't think it was ever really going to work out anyways, but it's just, yeah. So with the deleted scenes out of the way, that kind of wraps up just kind of my general things I wanted to cover in this video, kind of celebrating the 20th anniversary of Into the Blue. Again, this movie is just a lot of fun. It's entertaining. It's silly, but it's not too goofy. It's serious without being too serious. I think it strikes a really good balance. The underwater visuals are incredible. I love the location. Honestly, every time I watch this movie, it just makes me want to go out to the Bahamas or somewhere in Florida towards the Keys and just go diving. The closest thing I can do is get on my PlayStation VR and just, you know, swim around with the sharks and stuff. That's that's like the closest thing I got. But, you know, it's just, yeah, it just makes me want to go out and dive and do all the stuff that they do. And with the music and just the beautiful locations, like, it's hard not to at least have some entertainment from it. But I know with some people, you know, this movie just didn't do anything for them, which is completely fine. I mean, movies are subjective anyways. But I thought it'd be fun just to talk about kind of like a random movie besides like comic book movies and bigger movies, just to shed light on something that isn't talked about a whole lot. But I thought it was a good chance. It turns 20 years old this year, you know, and it's another chance to kind of skim over Paul Walker and some of his filmography and his legacy. And I think that's really cool. You know, I've always liked the guy, and about every movie I've seen him in, I've just always enjoyed him. And actually recently, I actually watched The Skulls for the first time, which actually also had Paul Walker in it too. The only reason I had interest in that movie was because it was directed by Rob Cohen, who went on to do Fast and Furious a year later. And then he also did Triple X. Like he had stated, I think it was in the I Am Paul Walker documentary, that he liked working with Paul and the Skulls, and that's kind of how their relationship started, and that's how he became Brian O'Connor and got cast for his role that defined his entire career as Brian O'Connor. But either way, I think this movie may be just a little overlooked or underrated. It's definitely kind of a forgotten film of his. And honestly, I mean, just in general, any movie that's not Fast and Furious, I think kind of just goes under the radar. It's not talked about as far as him as the star. But yeah, I thought that'd be cool to talk about whether you've seen Into the Blue or not. I think it's a really good time. It's really entertaining. So yeah, if you haven't seen it, give it a watch. You'll really like it. And if you have seen it, what'd you think about it? You know, let's talk about it. Let's have some discussions. But of course, stay tuned for future coverage of Daredevil Born Again as it's still airing. And then also, I've got the Punisher extended cut over on my shelf right over here, along with my 4K version of the theatrical cut. I'm going to have to watch both of these and kind of gauge some notes and stuff about the video I'm going to do about the extended cut, because I've never seen it. Up until someone had commented or said something, I had no clue that that version with Thomas Jane actually had an extended cut. But yeah, expect that soon. I'm going to start doing some notes and get ready for that. But yeah, thanks for watching this Into the Blue video. I know this is not going to be for everybody, but I appreciate the ones who have watched and have got this far and have just supported me in general. I can't express how much that means to me. And the last time I looked, I think we were at 26,000 subscribers, which is just insanity. I can't get over that. And it's all because of you guys. And I really appreciate it. But thanks for tuning in. I'll see you guys next time. Peace.